I'd like to thank General Brooks and General Toolan, who'll be speaking later. They're incredible friends of Australia, and just pick out that one particular phrase that General Brooks used, armies as an expression of commitment. It's a very powerful statement, and certainly so we know your deep commitment to supporting this relationship. I speak to you today representing an army impatient for further advancement on a modernisation journey. This is not to imply that we arrive at this point in an army that is stationary. This is not the case. As you've heard today, we are well advanced on a path of modernisation that began in the early 2000s and that many retired senior officers in this room have contributed to and guided previously. To use the Air Force vernacular, we commenced this journey as a third-generation analogue force. We're not likely to overtake Air Force anytime soon on their journey toward being a fifth-generation force, nor do we want to. But we are significantly better informed about what this journey entails than ever before. To stop or slow down is not an option. Army modernisation is not simply about the purchase and application of digital technology and new armoured vehicles. Rather, it is a process of modernising Army to be a contemporary fighting force capable of operating in an increasingly complex world. In my remarks to you today, I intend to give you an insight into the conditions that we predict will drive our modernisation process. I will also explain how these conditions are shaping the force of the future. I don't intend to preempt the release of the Defence White Paper, an unwise tactic for an Army officer speaking immediately before the Prime Minister, but I will describe the reality that underpins our modernisation decisions. The facts are these. The world in which our Army will be required to operate will have increasingly dense urban environments. These communities will comprise complex human groupings and conflicting loyalties. These loyalties will be based on deeply entrenched nationalism, ethnicity, tribe, religion and criminal affiliation. In Australia's area of direct interest, it will also comprise a complex maritime region with thousands of islands, dense populations, difficult terrain, and of course the seismic rumblings of the manoeuvring of nation-states. Despite Francis Fukuyama's assertion that the collapse of authoritarian regimes of right and left will in most cases lead to their replacement with liberal governments, suggesting an inevitable progression towards enlightenment, human populations seem determined to continue to fight each other. These populations fight for the same reasons described by the 5th century Greek philosopher Thucydides: fear, honour and self-interest, which somewhat pessimistically predict ongoing human conflict in one form or another. Some groups, such as ISIL, seem more than willing to reject the notions of civilisation and advancement to establish and maintain control over people and territory. While this type of human behaviour is not new, what has changed is that ISIL and groups like them now have access to increasingly lethal weapon systems. They also have information technology that was the preserve of only the most advanced nation-states less than a decade ago. They can communicate globally and exercise sophisticated command and control locally. So despite the protestations of some commentators anchored in an idealised past, the notion of a benign, light-scales army designed for local peacekeeping actions in the Pacific has little relevance to contemporary army modernisation. As the General Officer with primary responsibility for modernising the Army, my challenge is to help the Chief of the Army generate a force capable of giving the government realistic options about how to create a secure Australia and to contribute to our global responsibilities in the face of an increasingly challenging security environment. We can choose to characterise groups like ISIL as an insurgency, able to be defeated or contained using similar tools that was applied in Borneo and Malaya more than 50 years ago. Or we can recognise that they are representative of an adversary already capable of generating combined arms teams at around subunit level. They can coordinate fires in support of ground manoeuvre. They can combine swarming tactics with sophisticated information operations and operate across a range of dimensions, including the cyber dimension. They have adopted and further modernised the improvised explosive devices we faced in Afghanistan, and they employ the full range of captured Iraqi security force weapons and vehicles. They, and similar groups that will inevitably follow, will close the gap rapidly to an army that stands still or fails to develop at a reasonable pace. My remarks today are intended to give you an honest appraisal of where I think we stand on the modernisation journey, and for many of you representing defence industry, I'll be seeking your help to maintain our modernisation momentum. Since taking over as head of modernisation, I have been seeking to ensure we have a specific focus on how an army creates and maintains advantage. I describe 4 broad approaches to achieving military advantage: size, platform superiority, human performance and decision superiority. I'll briefly discuss how these relate to our modernisation process before I focus on 2. Size. In the military context, size or mass has a quality all of its own. Even the most advanced and capable forces can eventually be overwhelmed by mass. Our small army will not be able to rely on size as an advantage, but as you've heard from both Generals Burr and Brooks, there are ways that armies cooperate together to achieve virtual mass. I won't pursue this particular theme any further. Platform or technical superiority. In a region of rapidly growing affluence, it will be difficult to keep all 3 services of the ADF at the leading edge of technology. We will need to be judicious in where we seek to outspend other nations. This will rarely be the sole method our army relies upon to achieve advantage. But we will fight to never fall short of providing our soldiers the levels of protection that they need to survive on a contemporary battle space. Human performance. This is one of our strengths. We've demonstrated the ability to generate high-performance teams and people for many years. We have a military culture that allows decentralised decision-making, encourages innovation and demands cooperation. These are strengths that our modernisation process will continue and better facilitate. Finally, as an army, we can seek advantage through decision superiority. Now, there'll be many in the room who want to debate the definition of decision superiority, but I define it simply to mean to empower commanders at all levels to have their forces in exactly the right place and time to achieve local overmass of mass or technology. This enables the achievement of surprise and, if necessary, to apply violence to force an adversary to change their actions. So keep these factors in mind as I discuss our modernisation context. Let me move to some specific issues. The Chief of the Army has spoken about the challenging roles faced by a modern army. These range from operations far from home in the face of an aggressive and adaptive enemy, like the Taliban or the Daesh, to a role as part of an Australian joint force contribution to our regionally focused maritime strategy. Now, while these sound like markedly divergent tasks, the democratisation of lethality, the universal access to highly capable weapon systems has brought the reality of these tasks closer together in recent years. A land force now needs a high level of protection and lethality wherever it deploys. The proliferation of highly capable weapon systems to state and non-state actors will narrow the gap between what they have in the past been divergent points on a linear spectrum of conflict, with security operations at one end, conventional operations at the other. As weapon systems with increased lethality, precision, accuracy and range have become more widely available, prediction of the intensity of a potential conflict will be difficult. Instead of a linear conflict spectrum, we are planning on the basis of an ink blotter spectrum in which there are hotspots of highly lethal close combat across the battle space, perhaps interspersed with more benign locations where our forces can move with a reduced threat. At the central point of one of these ink blots, the intensity of the experience for the soldiers involved will not differ from those faced by their predecessors in the most intense close combat as part of state-on-state conflict in the past. In this hybrid environment, Australia's forces must be capable of conducting a range of security tasks with and among the human population, while deploying with sufficient combat weight to prevail in close combat where and when that eventuates. Now, this audience is astute enough to suggest that if we have appropriate levels of decision superiority, we should be able to avoid such lethal hotspots, or at least stand off and engage an enemy using joint fires. And, when this is possible, this is exactly how we will fight. Army expects to be part of a joint and coalition operating system in which asymmetric advantage is achieved through the use of cross-domain joint effects. Where possible, we will conduct land manoeuvre in order to flush out an enemy force, Causing the enemy to move brings them above the detection threshold and they can be destroyed using joint and standoff capabilities. Sadly, as we have found in northern Iraq, a cunning enemy is not always this cooperative. An adversary will quickly adapt and the land force component must be capable of surviving unexpected contact with the enemy who has been sufficiently well trained to stay below the detection threshold, to stay inside buildings, to operate out of military uniforms and hide amongst the population. Despite our best efforts, often a concealed enemy gets to choose where and when the fight starts. Our force must be able to survive this initial engagement. They can then bring to bear their better training, their access to precision weapons and lethal direct firepower. Our experience is recently that when our soldiers survive that initial engagement, they win. It is for this reason we do not apologise for seeking a combat reconnaissance vehicle to replace the ASLAV that has significantly enhanced levels of protection when compared with its predecessor. Will the multi-purpose vehicles that we choose fit in a C-130? No, it won't. Will its weight cause some difficulty crossing small bridges in the littoral environment? It probably will. Will it be versatile enough to survive and win in lethal hotspots on a modern battlefield, but move easily through lower threat areas without disruption to the population? Yes, it will. Can it be rapidly deployed on a C-17 or landed from a Canberra-class LHD? Yes, absolutely. Will it have sensors and communication systems to enable it to be a node for information to enhance mission command? Yes, it will. So we're building your army to be able to survive and win in a more lethal, complex environment. We think complex operations will continue to require a mix of general purpose and special operations forces, and we think that we have this balance right. Special forces units form an important part of our human performance advantage. And in most cases, they're our testbed for advanced systems. I work closely with the Commander Special Operations Command to ensure that we use their agility and innovation to rapidly identify capabilities that will provide us an advantage before transitioning these into the remainder of Army. We've done this very effectively recently in our soldier combat ensemble modernisation, in micro unmanned air systems, and we see the next advantage coming from their highly developed capacity for improving human performance in such areas as language, joint integration, cultural awareness, physical training and injury recovery. We also know the contemporary operating environment is a connected one. As well as having increased lethality, our potential adversary now has access to methods of digital command and control that were only recently the preserve of the most advanced nations. Handheld digital processors, communications devices can pass imagery and position location. They can employ encryption and they can conduct real-time chat in secure forums. Almost any potential adversary is now in the contest with us for decision superiority. For the past decade, we've been able to assume a level of superiority in this contest. We have privileged access to the Five Eyes strategic surveillance and intelligence capabilities, the envy of most nations. We can access the advanced ISR capabilities of our own system, such as the Joint Over-the-Horizon Networks, our space situational awareness capabilities, the Wedgetail AEW&C platform, and our own unmanned aerial systems. However, this reliance on decision superiority comes with risk. An adaptive adversary will study how we expect to achieve advantage. And we know many states already have the ability to disrupt the range of systems upon which we rely. Jamming of the GPS signal disrupts precision navigation and timing. Penetration of our networks introduces the risk of data theft and the insertion of disruptive code. And at the highest end of capability, the contested space domain risks denial of our incredibly important satellite links. Our modernised mission command capability must therefore be resilient and able to operate in a contested space and cyber domain. The Australian Defence Force is going to commence the transition to what I would call the next generation of cyber defence for the ADF. Our national response to the first generation cyber challenge has been first class, and that is the threat posed to the internet-facing systems. The Australian Signals Directorate is an active part of our national defence on a daily basis. Generation 2 development will acknowledge that our military systems are no longer standalone or isolated. This move challenges challenges the cyber defence beyond ASD and moves it into Army, Navy and Air Force. The emergence of the cyber domain as the fifth domain for military planning, land, sea, air, space and now cyber, is a challenging addition for the services. What are the new training requirements? What are the new skills that we require? How do we recruit and retrain cyber soldiers? Does every soldier now need to be an expert in close combat, or do we need increased specialisation? This is new but exciting ground for the Army, and it is one our leadership team embraces and will pursue aggressively. Let me finish on this theme of digital systems. In May of this year, the Chief of the Army signed off on the final operating capability of the first stage of our journey to modernise our command and control systems in the Army. I was part of this journey as a brigade commander and lived the excitement and frustrations of that process. The process, which we have called Digitizing the Army under the banner of Project Land 200, has had its critics both within and without Army. And to be honest, in reviewing the process to date, I'm reminded of that Irish joke in which a tourist stops to ask a local farmer directions to Dublin. The farmer replies, "Well, there's your problem, I wouldn't start here." Well, if we were to start the process of modernising our ability to command and control the Army again, we wouldn't start from where we are. But we're here all the same, and we've learnt a tremendous amount in the process. We've learned that the advantage we seek is not in the digitisation process itself. We will describe the next phase of the journey as modernising mission command, not digitisation. Modernising mission command directs us to where the big advantages are to be found: in the achievement of decision superiority through shared situational awareness, collaborative planning to increase tempo, and the ability to change our tactics so we can move dispersed and rapidly concentrate where necessary. The big gains are not to be found from the bottom up, but rather through the generation of effects at the command level, from formation through battle group and into the combat teams where the tempo of our operations is controlled. How do we get these teams to the right place and the right time on the battle space to achieve advantage? How do we get them the intelligence and imagery to prevent unexpected contact with the enemy? How do we give them access to the joint fires that will, where possible, allow them to kill their enemy without the need for dangerous close combat? And how do we rapidly regenerate this capability to get those forces onto their next objective before their adversary can react? While we have been down a few cul-de-sacs on this digitisation journey, we've also made some very good decisions. We have chosen a robust terrestrial mesh network as the basis of our mission command system. This will give us significant resilience in an environment where access to space becomes increasingly contested. Our system is simple to operate, and our workforce, the iPad generation, very quickly master its basics and often find ways to exceed our expectations in its application. We are criticised for having more than one battle management system, and in this case, we do have two battle management systems, a battle management system fires and a battle management system manoeuvre. Again, this is less than perfect. As we plan the next generation of our processes to modernise mission command, we will insist on an open architecture approach from our suppliers that moves us beyond proprietary barriers and prevents the need for such duplication. That said, for an army that will need resilience at the same time as it's generating digital mastery, having redundancy in our system is probably proving to be an advantage. I can tell this audience that we are accelerating into this process every day. We have leaders at all levels in the Army fighting to get involved, pulling our mission command capability rather than waiting for top-down push. We have a series of risk reduction activities underway to understand the next set of challenges before we launch into the next phase of the process. In the next phase, we add the Tiger reconnaissance helicopter, we add our armoured vehicles, and we deliver a specific set of improved brigade command and control tools, as well as proliferating that system into our training institutions. In this phase, we seek to transition from bolt-on mission command systems to one that is fully integrated into our fighting systems, an Army version, if you like, of the glass cockpit on an aircraft in the RAAF. We will build in the development capacity of processing power, so in the future our vehicles can have tactical data links with joint systems, so our vehicles have the capacity to adopt close active protection systems and things like smart vehicle health monitoring systems. If there's any in this audience waiting for the process to fail in order that we might start on this journey again with their proprietary system, My advice is that holding your breath will simply cause you to turn purple. We have delivered an outstanding battle group command and control system, and we're now a digitally savvy army that knows what it wants from this process. Our final validation activity will be the conduct of an operation with our US allies in a network integration next year in the White Sands missile range that will confirm our ability to operate on a Five Eyes, a digitally connected network. So if you're from industry and you want to sell Army your system, combine these magic words: open architecture, with a description of how your product will allow us to build an integrated system based on agreed protocols and standards. To stretch the Air Force language, we've moved from a third-generation Army and have reached Generation 4, a level of digital connectivity that is empowering a fundamental change to the way we conduct mission command. Generation 5, the Joint Strike Fighter level processing power and system connectivity added with stealth, may be out of our reach for now, but the likelihood that we will fail in this process and revert back to analogue processes is well behind us. So let me conclude with an image that I think summarises what I've described today. Imagine, please, an adaptive and aggressive adversary like the Aidid militia in Somalia in 1993. An adversary embedded in a heavily populated area, almost impossible to differentiate from the population that conceals them. In 2016, perhaps, or 2017 or 2018, they might bring down an Australian MRH-90 operating from HMAS Canberra with a rocket-propelled grenade or a handheld anti-aircraft missile. In the MRH-90 down scenario, we would be facing an adversary who has had the chance to start the fight from below our detection threshold. They surround themselves with local people, often against their will, preventing the use of our standoff joint fires. However, this time, instead of the 1993 techniques of using piles of burning tyres to coordinate the actions of the militia force, our adversary would be using smart devices, digital imagery, encrypted chat functions, and could probably jam local GPS receivers. The ground force that we would need to send in to recover the crew and passengers of MRH-90 down is an example of what drives the characteristics of the force that we must build. It will comprise micro combined armed teams designed to deal with the most lethal levels of close combat. It will have the protection needed to survive unexpected contact with a dangerous and capable enemy before bringing to bear its advantage in training and leadership. It will have a modern mission command system that gives it the opportunity to adapt to the changing situations faster than the adversary, and it will have combat weight needed to fight through the resistance to achieve its objective. So in conclusion, there's a range of modernisation challenges that face our Army that time prevents me from discussing today, but I welcome engagement with you for the remainder of the event. I have not discussed our need to better identify end-to-end simulation needs, nor have I discussed how we will continue the process of soldier modernisation through our Digger Works program once our next phase of Land 125 concludes. With additional time, I could also describe the challenges faced by our excellent special forces in signature management, biometric data capture and storage, and further integration with the other services. After the release of the white paper, we will further analyse our role within a maritime strategy, including further development of our capacity to build partner capacity through international engagement, and potentially to develop land-based anti-access and area denial capabilities. These are exciting times to be in the modernisation game, and I look forward to working with industry and other partners to refine our approach. Thank you.